Buddhism is really overrated as a philosophy to live by. The three things that all humans want: survival, connection, and status. Status is kind of like a dangerous drug, and we get flashes of incredible happiness from it. Who do I have to be? What do I have to believe in order to get along and get ahead? If we all became amazing Buddhists overnight, progress would stop and civilization would collapse.
What is the problem with Buddhism?
For me, the problem with Buddhism is that it misunderstands human nature. It thinks it understands how people tick and what people need, but it actually doesn't. So if you listen to lots of contemporary Buddhists and indeed lots of non-contemporary Buddhists, what they'll tell you is that the source of all our misery is wanting and striving. And so to be kind of happy, to be content, you need to kind of work on yourself. So you want less and you strive less. And ultimately, you need to kind of destroy your ego, which is their kind of name for the illusory self. So this theory has played out really well in the West since the 60s when it became fashionable. Because in the West, we're wanters and we're strivers. That's who we are. We're individualists. We go out there and we want to do things. And that causes, and the Buddhists are right about this, like, does cause stress. It causes misery. It puts us at risk of failure. So it's caught on really well. People do mindfulness meditation in order to reduce their ego needs and to reduce their wanting and their striving. But what they don't understand, in my view, is that wanting and striving is really the best of human nature. Without wanting and striving, we wouldn't have civilization. If we all became amazing Buddhists overnight, progress would stop and civilization would collapse.
It's interesting. I heard someone, business guru definitely said this: the only thing harder than getting a Lamborghini is not wanting one. And I carried that with me for a while and I felt challenged by it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, is it maybe my own fault for wanting something? And then you go into this deep kind of thought process in your mind. And then I was like, but ultimately, it's quite a nice thing to get it. It's quite a nice thing to accomplish it. And those emotions of walking into a dealership, buying a car. I recently have had a couple of what I can only call dickhead purchases. And I won't lie, when a stranger at a petrol station compliments me on the car, or when I see kids standing by the car at a coffee shop and I open it up, I say, go sit in it. I like that because it's recognition for hard work and accomplishments. And that little bit of status attribution, which is what the compliment is, makes me feel good. And very interestingly, after reading your books, I feel like I've become a promoter of your message. Yep. There's many books I've read. We've spoken before offline. Some authors I fucking absolutely hate, but I try and tell people there's this invisible force that's playing upon them, especially in jiu-jitsu. I actually had this discussion this morning. I said, I've got Will Storr coming on my podcast. I said, have you read the book, The Status Game? I said, no. I said, it's very good. And I said to them, we're playing this right now with the belt that you have on, the accomplishments. You're a world champion. You flew to Vegas out of your own pocket to fight strangers so that you could stand on a podium and be at the top. You get recognition from it. You get love from it. It gives you fulfillment, and it makes all of those years of training and sacrifice and injuries worth it, when really it's probably a $15 medal. And then I said, we all line up in order of our status and we're given it with the belts. And I think the majority of people don't even understand that emotion, the tears that come down their face when they get a black belt, really what they're achieving is a higher level of status. Yet they might go through life without even knowing it. How can you explain to someone that's still listening to this, doesn't quite know what status is?
Well, status has a bad rep in the West, and that's partly because of these Eastern ideas that have been popular and fashionable for decades now, since our parents, some of our grandparents were young. And so when we think about the pursuit of status, we think about gaudiness, we think about shallowness, we think about maybe the Kardashians or Jeff Bezos, and it's like to pursue status is this kind of negative thing. And as I say, I think that's partly because we've been trained by a lot of these fashionable ideas from the East to think of status as a negative thing. But it isn't a negative thing, really. And to understand that, you've got to go back to our evolutionary past. So what is a human being? A human being is this weird kind of chimpanzee ant hybrid. We are an ape, a species of ape. We're not like an ape, we are an ape. We're one of 5 existing species of great ape. but we're obviously not like the other apes. And we're not like the other apes because we have mastered the art of cooperation in a similar way to the ants do and bees do. Rather than individually going out there and solving the challenges of survival, we get together in cooperative groups, and each member of the group plays their part, and it's that group that goes and gets what it wants. So that's human life. That's a factory. That's a political party. That's a nation. That's an economy. That's a football team. That's what we do. That's how humans operate, and that's how humans have taken over the world, by gathering into these highly cooperative groups. Now, in order to make that work, our brains have got to be wired a certain way, and the human brain has two deep, fundamental, profound needs. And the first deep, fundamental, profound need that everyone likes and we talk about it endlessly and nobody has a problem admitting is connection. So we have a deep need to feel accepted by other people, that we belong, that we're loved, and that we give love. So to love and be loved is a fundamental part of our human nature. And again, that's because of our evolution, because we have to operate in these highly cooperative groups. The second part of that is we want status. So it's not just enough to be accepted by a group. We've got to be valuable to the group. We've got to be useful to the group. So we've evolved to need the feeling of respect. And the more respect we get, the higher we climb up the status game of our tribe, and the greater our rewards. So even in hunter-gatherer groups, pre-modern groups, there are status hierarchies, and the higher status you have in that group, the more food you get, the better food you get, the safer sleeping sites, the greater your access to your choice of mates. So everything gets better the higher we climb up the status game of our groups, and that is universal. That was true, 50,000 years ago. It's true today, and ironically, it's even true in the world of Buddhism. So Buddhist monks, but actual Buddhists, are playing an absolutely unvarnished status game. They believe in reincarnation. So the Buddhists believe they're going to be reincarnated in one of 6 realms. The bottom realm is like hell. It's torture, fire, and misery and pain and burning. The top realm is wealth, power, splendor, luxury. So that's what the Buddhist monks are doing. They are devoting their lives to this Buddhist status game with the sincere belief that the better they do at playing this status game, the higher they're going to climb in their in these 6 realms when they're reincarnated. And what they want is to be in this top realm of wealth, splendor, and power, and ultimately to break free of the whole cycle of rebirth and death completely. So even the Buddhists are playing this status game. So you can't get rid of it. It's an ineradicable part of human nature. It's in our brains. We do it constantly. You can't go into any social situation without your brain completely helplessly, you can't control it, figuring out who is kind of where in the hierarchy of this group and trying to hustle your way perhaps into getting a better position within it.
We even have that in Christianity with the Pope being at the top. And then there's a priest, and then everyone kind of looks up, and when the Pope walks in, the priests will get giddy and they'll be a bit drunk. I was like, oh my God, I touched his hand.
The Archbishop looked at me.
And the same way you can even look at our monarch in the UK, where if, the late Queen had been to an event and my mum and dad would have been like, oh my God, the Queen was there. My generation,
yeah,
cool. David Beckham was here 2 weeks ago. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
And the games that we play are incredibly important because, as you say, they're like an MMA, UFC world champion. You can walk into any MMA gym in the world and everyone would bend over backwards to cater for them. Can we get you anything? Yet if they walked into a different environment, someone that's not playing the same game, you're just a dude with dodgy ears. Yeah. So we must play these games. Buddhism originates in the East. Am I right thinking that?
Yeah.
And then from your book, The Science of Storytelling, one thing that I'd never considered before as well, that even stories, get you to explain this better than me, have very different meanings and structures from the West and the East. Whereas, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, in the West, it's all about I and myself, and in the East, it's all about we and the collective. That's
right, and that's actually not just storytelling. That's culture. So Westerners have this individualist culture. So the default human culture is we. We are very, as I said, we're very groupish. So outside of the West, if you go to Africa, if you go to Asia, even parts of Europe, the Scandinavian countries are kind of more collective than we are. It's much more about the we. So you've got this kind of much more groupish sense of self where it feels like the group is the more important thing. And so, so we understand how in China, for example, they have lots of human rights abuses. And they're more accepting of those things because for the average Chinese person, it's honorable to sacrifice yourself on behalf of your group. Like even if in our view in the West, it would be unjust. The group is all important. So the West is different because in the West, we have this individualist mindset, which is I am more important than the group. And so that reflects in all kinds of ways. That reflects in our storytelling. So, one of the most amazing facts about East Asian storytelling I found was that in China, they didn't have such a thing as an autobiography for 2,000 years. Like for us in the West, what would be more obvious than telling the story of an amazing person? Here's an amazing person, tell me their story. But they didn't even occur to the Chinese for 2,000 years. And when autobiographies started to be, or biographies started to be told, their subject was not at the center of the action, but on the peripheries looking in. So it's a completely different way of kind of seeing the world. But that's why, in the West, we have this culture of individual striving. It's why in the West, we invented the concept of human rights. So in the West, the individual is of ultimate importance. We sacralize the rights of the individual. So every individual has equal rights. And so from that, you get human rights. And that's why human rights comes out of the West. And why it's the less important part of life in Russia or Africa or East Asia, China. So yeah, that's the difference. And it even manifests in things like why people commit suicide. If you look at the data, people in the West are more likely to take their own lives, sadly, when they feel like they've failed. That's why middle-aged men are the most at risk of suicide, because men value competence, and it's in middle age when our competencies leave us. We hit against the barriers of our failure. We might get divorced. We think we failed our family. We think we failed our wives. Whereas in places like Korea and China, it's much more common for people to commit suicide when they feel that they've brought shame upon their group, for example. So it manifests in all kinds of different ways.
I want to get back to the mental health debate, but it's very interesting when you say that I think about, well, I'm not sure if I told you this last time we spoke, but my TikTok feed at the moment is abandoned Soviet architecture through the whole Soviet Union.
Oh, wow.
So it could be Belgrade, and it could be Serbia, it could be some Norwegian places, but the buildings and the architecture, I never realized the brutalist architecture was to strip people of their feelings of individualism.
Yeah, right.
We are going to put you all in the buildings that look exactly the same so that none of you can feel more important than the other. You are a cog in a massive machine. And there's something quite haunting and daunting about all of that concrete. And it very much strips people of that sense of individualism. Even in the UK, you can decorate your house how you want, or essentially, have something to express yourself. So it kind of haunts me whenever I see that. And when you say that, is that one of the reasons, those cultures, as to why maybe communism is more prevalent there? We need a political party that is incumbent of the nation, not potentially one person.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So you do see that kind of thing happening in the West in particular context. So if somebody joins the army or joins a nunnery or becomes a monk, often that their hair is stripped back. That they have to put on an identical uniform. Basically, all the kind of symbols of their individual identity are taken away, and they're forced into this identity of the group. And and that's why in monasteries and in armies and in cults and religions, there's lots of ritual. Everyone's doing the same thing at the same time, saying the same things at the same time. It's all about sort of tuning the mind into that group identity over the individual identity, which we kind of value so much in the West.
Still want to get back to mental health, but when you talk about cults and ideologies, some people, and again, you'll know this better than me, are drawn into these crazy cults because of status. There is the feeling of being part of a group, whether that's being an anti-vaxxer, whether that's being a climate denier. Some people could look from the outside and think this person's just batshit crazy, but really they're looking for a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And if someone's gone through life and they've never accomplished status with their profession or within a sporting group or within any other realm, suddenly all they need is an opinion and the group will welcome them in. Is that the primary reason why people get pulled into ideological cults?
Yeah, it is. That's right. So I talked before about, we want connection and status. We want to be loved and respected. Psychologists sometimes talk about getting along and getting ahead. Those are the two, the human brain wants three things: survival, connection, and status. Those three things are absolutely vital to it, and it wants them more than anything else. So, assuming that the survival stuff is taken care of, we've got food and drink and water, what it cares about is, who do I have to be in order to get along and get ahead? Who do I have to be? What do I have to believe in order to achieve connection and status? It doesn't really care about what's true. The brain's not that interested in the truth. The brain's interested in in those questions. And so that's why people join their groups, and that's why people, when people join groups, they become more similar to the other people in those groups, because the primary goal is, I want to connect with these people, and I want to earn status, in their eyes. And so that's why even really smart people can become really irrational and start believing things that we think are completely crazy, because it doesn't matter how smart you are, the brain just wants connection and status within a tribe, and it will believe whatever it feels you have to believe in order to achieve those things.
Including Scientology.
Absolutely, including Scientology. Yeah, absolutely. And climate change, or whatever it might be,
There are two people in my mind. These are going to be controversial opinions, but since understanding status better, I feel like I can see clearly. We've got Brian Johnson, the guy who wants to live to about forever.
Yeah.
And then Gary Economics.
Yeah.
Now, my theory is, and again, I'll probably get a lot of hate for this, Gary Economics seems to say, tax the rich, tax wealth. He kind of says things that from the outside looking in, they don't really make much sense. He kind of repeats the same things, and there's not much to his argument. And someone was thinking, why would someone with millions of pounds go on TV with an old tracksuit and say the same things over and over again? I seem to think he would have got a lot of money from his work and got the millions of pounds in the bank account and gone, is that it? I thought I wanted wealth.
Yeah.
And never got a taste of status. And all it took was, for one time, him go, tax the rich, they've got too much money, listen, tax the rich more. And then he would have been in Sainsbury's and someone would go, mate, you're a legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I reckon we should tax the rich too. And he comes home and he goes, wow, well, that made me feel more alive than the millions of pounds in my bank account. So he goes, another TV show, listen, my friends can't even afford to live. Well, if you've got millions, why not give them a little bit, for a start? If you're a multi-millionaire and you're the best banker in the city and your friend can't afford shoes, maybe buy him a pair of shoes. And I almost feel that I'm watching someone get drunk on status.
Yeah.
Doing as many podcast interviews, regurgitating the same thing. And I think it's not even potentially the mission that he loves, not even the virtue. I could even argue that he doesn't really care that much if the rich get taxed. He's enjoying that level of status, the amount of people following him, complimenting him, telling him he's great. And with the same with Brian Johnson, sold his company for hundreds of millions, goes on this mission to try and research longevity and living forever. But then when he's doing dances on TikTok and doing all of these things, I'm like, hold on, is your mission really to help people live forever? Or are you also just someone that made the huge amounts of money, but you never got the thing you really wanted, which was status? And now you've got millions of people commenting, you're the best thing humanity's ever had. Thank you for doing so much for us. Those people, I can't help but look, maybe were chasing the wrong things in life. And then they find it later on in status.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. And the analysis is correct. It's, we think it's money that we want, but it isn't. People only really value money as a symbol of status, and you can see that in kind of obvious ways. I mean, when women spend tens of thousands of pounds on a handbag, or men spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on a car, it's not because they want to get anywhere any further. It's because they want the symbols of status. And with that behavior, they are proving they value money more than status, because they're literally given an offer, give me 30 grand and you can have this handbag. All right, I'll swap that 30 grand for a bit of leather. They're making that trade. Give me the status. So even the people that we would identify as the most kind of money obsessed are actually the most status obsessed. And that certainly goes for people like Gary Economics and any kind of public intellectual. I wouldn't say any, but I think what you described there is audience capture. And I do think it's a massively powerful thing. You see it in the direction of travel of certain people like Jordan Peterson, who, I quote in many of my books. I used to think as quite a even-minded person, but he's gone on this journey of kind of anger and rage and going more and more right-wing in my estimation. And I think part of that has got to be that audience capture. He's become like a godlike figure amongst, sort of right-wing leaning people. And I feel he's gone further and further that way. And you can see it in various left-wing figures too, that the more time they spend on the internet, the more extreme they become.
And it becomes something that they get gratification with, not only status, but with views, with attention.
Yeah.
When people can maybe not only just have status as what they want, but the recognition, having to spread the message and kind of having that virtue that's misinterpreted. So we can have these items and objects that really what we're doing is signaling.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it as well. When I bought my car, the guy said, what are you looking for? I said, to show off.
Yeah.
I said, to be perfect honest, he goes, this is the car for you then. And the same when we wear a watch. again, when you buy a Rolex, quite literally all you want is to status signal.
Yeah.
You do not give a shit about the time.
No.
I think anyone that says that is lying. And again, it's signaling to your friends, your family. But some of these signals that people of high status let off, not all of them are physical objects. Would it be right in thinking that potentially the speed in which you speak, your posture, the way you carry yourself, what other kind of status signaling mechanisms are there that you could spot?
Oh, there's loads, and you know, so many of them are not even conscious, and some of them are culturally dependent. So different cultures have different ideas of how far away, how much personal space you should give other people. So in the West, we're like, you know, in Britain, in Japan, you know, we like a bit of personal space, and when people intrude on your personal space, it's a lack of respect. It's a status thing. Eye contact is a big one. So your brain is constant. So neuroscientists talk about this thing called the status detection system, or sometimes known as the hierometer, higher being for hierarchy. So it's measuring your place in the hierarchy. And it measures, like, with numerical precision, the amount of I'm very conscious of our eye contact now, the amount of eye contact that happens during a conversation. There's a particular ratio in which a speaker and a listener should be giving and submitting eye contact, and I think it's 0.7 ratio, and so wherever you go, basically the higher status person will be giving a particular amount of eye contact. So your brain's constantly measuring that. There's another thing that which we're not consciously aware of, which is that there's a frequency in the spoken voice, which we can't consciously hear, but which the subconscious brain can pick up on. And what happens in a conversation is the higher status person sets the frequency, and the lower status person or people match that frequency. And again, it's the way that the brain's sorting out what's the hierarchy here. And so these researchers, as part of their study, went through years and years of talk shows by Larry King, an American talk show guy, and they could figure out by listening to this tone who he felt higher status from, who he felt lower status from. And interestingly, when it was kind of jiggling about, when it didn't quite match, those were very contentious, kind of a bit argumentative conversations. So you could see there was this status competition going on between the guest and Larry King. So all of that stuff is going on. You know, one of these studies that I talk about in the status game, they found that when they flashed a picture of somebody to a participant in a study, they would make inferences about their status and their competence and their kind of kindness instantly, like in milliseconds. And it depended on how they were dressed. So if they were dressed in nice clothes, they would consider them higher status and more competent. If they were dressed in poorer clothes. And the interesting thing is that happened even when they were told beforehand, these are two people, they work at exactly the same company, they've got the same wage, they still made the inferences based on how they were dressed. And then they were offered money, we're going to pay you to judge these people differently. And they couldn't do it, you know. So that's how stubborn this kind of status detection system is. It's always on, it's always working. And these are just ones we found out about. I'm sure there are lots of things. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there were smell things going on. There's so much going on. Status is so fundamentally important to the human animal that it's just constantly using everything kind of to measure. I mean, one of the studies I always think about that I wrote about in the status game is about orange juice, where they got people in a social situation and they poured everyone some orange juice, but one person got a bit less orange juice than the other people. And of course, the other person started obsessing about the orange juice in that kind of like, you know, Larry David kind of way. Why have I got less orange juice? And so they become preoccupied with the orange juice. And of course, it's because to humans, it's not about you've got a bit more drink than me. It's about what the fuck, you know. The orange juice becomes a status signaler. So that's how obsessed we are with status.
I hope that you're enjoying the episode so far. For those of you who don't know, Chris Williamson and I started a nootropics business just over a year ago. So whether you want an energy drink that has brain-boosting ingredients in it that help you concentrate and sustain focus, we have the drink. And if you're someone that's into your nootropic supplements in pill form, we also have the pills. And for any of you that don't know who Chris Williamson is, that's completely fine. Some random podcaster. Please head to newtonic.com, try out our products. I'm confident you'll love them. And if any of you aren't absolutely in love with our products, just drop me an email on james@newtonic.com and I'll make it right. Let's go back to the episode. There's been even brands that have fallen through people trying to signal status. I always think of Burberry, where Burberry was a way of signaling status that I've got money, I can buy a scarf with this pattern. Then next thing you know, what we would call in the UK, quote unquote, chavs at school, all my friends had Burberry hats and the brand were like, oh God, we need to get rid of this. Another thing here that is very interesting that, again, I can't shake from reading your work is when people have their status attacked or people try and reduce someone else's status. So, and this is how I'm circling back into the mental health debate. We'll start with murder.
Yeah.
So I believe you said that in almost gang warfare, one of the main reasons that someone would kill someone is because they disrespected them. And that is an attack on someone's status. So this is something that could be quite fragile in people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's like the leading cause of most violence is male on male, young men on young men. That's so contrary to what you might think, men are the primary victims of violence, even unprovoked violence, stranger violence. Men are primarily the victims of that kind of violence, and the most common cause is this idea of disrespect. You've done something to disrespect me. I mean, I was brought up in an English town, and I think all English towns I don't think they're the same now, but certainly in the 80s and 90s, they're just fucking violent places. Like you're walking back from the pub or the club on a Friday night, and if you don't get beaten up, you're going to see somebody get beaten up. It's just a common thing. It's always young men that do it. And one of the sort of most interesting things that kind of stayed with me was this violence researcher said, what you've got to understand about that is if a violent man feels disrespected, then their status has gone down. By violently attacking that person, the person that they believe is guilty, they don't just go back to naught; they go up. So if you are, I'm not a violent person; I don't have that in me. But if you are a violent person and you're comfortable with violence, then the temptation to do that is going to be almost overwhelming, because that's how you do it. And the more you do it, the higher your status amongst your violent tribe of people. So it's a massive cause of violence. So much of human violence is about status, and the other thing to understand about violence is the role of humiliation. So humiliation is the sudden and dramatic loss of status, and so when people are humiliated, it's a very dangerous thing to do, to humiliate somebody else, because they're likely to want to get revenge on you, if not by violence in some other way. Because when we feel our status has been taken away, we become aggressive. And we will do, we'll go to sort of extreme lengths to get that status back sometimes.
When you say honor killings, I think of the samurais, where if they had caused shame or disrespect, they would, I can't remember what it's called, but they would pretty much stab themselves and
seppuku or something.
Yeah, pull their insides out. Yeah. But are those honor killings happening in the modern world as we speak? And if so, what countries and what kind of things? Because you brushed on it there, but I'm not sure I actually know that much about this.
Yeah, they happen in the UK. It seems to be families with an Islamic background. I don't know if Hindus, it might be Hindus too, but it's certainly a sense of moral shame brought upon the family. Is often when, the second generation of the family, so the, people born in London or Birmingham or wherever, start behaving in ways that are deemed too Western. So they might, the girl might wear too short skirts, or they might be gay and have a homosexual relationship, or something like this. These are the kind of common causes of honor killings, and the family will kill the child in order to restore their sense of status within their community. So it's savage. It's absolutely savage.
Sounds like something I would have only thought would happen in Iran, or that's very
unfortunately
disturbing.
Not. Yeah.
What you say there about humiliation as well. I can't remember the name of the lad who it was, but I think there was naked photos of some lad that had been either hacked from his computer, or he'd sent to someone thinking it was someone in an intimate relationship, and they backfired and said, if you don't send us £1,000, we're going to send these to your family, and the young lad kills himself. Again, that would be a example of suicide from the humiliation, loss of status. Some people could think, and how on earth, well, he never had any mental health issues, or he'd never shown any signs of depression. But really what occurred there was such a massive amount of shame, or all of these emotions that would lead someone to do something like that. What kind of prevalence would you say there is on mental health and people maybe not even understanding status? Because this is the thing that, if you could sit down with that lad and go, these are the emotions you're feeling. This is because of this. This isn't temporary. This is just an emotion you're feeling. This isn't actually going to be that bad. If people could understand status and the power that plays over their emotions, surely that would be a net benefit to all of humanity. I can't believe we don't get taught about this in school. If I'm,
I know, well, I agree, and that's why I think it's such a shame that people have such a negative view of the idea of status, and that's why I think it's important to understand that all it is the feeling of I'm offering value to other people. I mean, that's a great thing. That's one of the best things about, I would argue perhaps the best thing about the human animal, about our species, is that we are wired to want to feel like we are offering value to other people, because status is the reward, and that could be value in competence, like I'm good at something, or value in kind of moral value. I'm considered to be a good person, a kind person, a courageous person. So yeah, that's all it is. And the situation you describe, I mean, it's absolutely true that a sudden loss of status is a massive red flag for suicidal ideation. I work in my spare time. I'm a Samaritans volunteer, so I speak quite a lot to people who are feeling like they want to end their lives, and it's a very, very common thing that you hear, which is, I'm useless, I'm pathetic, I'm rubbish. All I do is this connection to, no one likes me. If someone's feeling no one likes me, no one values me, and there's nothing I can do about it, you're at very high risk of suicidal ideation. And as you say, I think part of that is we don't understand status. We reject it. When I published my book, there was so much pushback from people who just didn't want to accept that we are this helplessly status-seeking animal, which kind of boggles my mind, really, because nobody likes to be called an arsehole. Why not? Because it's taken away your status. It's a universal. Come on, some of the most precious moments in life, with your jiu-jitsu, is when we achieve something. Oh my God, my first book was published, or I won my first award. These are precious moments, and the idea that we should sort of feel bad about them, and even with your kind of sports car stuff, like, why should you feel bad? Even your choice of words, I've been guilty of that. You said you shouldn't be. We're made to feel guilty about that, but you shouldn't feel guilty about that. It's part of human nature. You go back to a pre-modern tribe, the hunter will decorate their dwelling with skulls, and they might wear a necklace of teeth. It's part of who we are. Is to show I'm a valuable person to my community. That's it can be a very bad thing, but also this, without the status drive that we have in us, as I say, there would be no civilization, there would be no cities, there would be no technology, there would be no medicine. All of that stuff is powered by people pushing and pushing and pushing because they crave the feeling of, I've done something, people respect me, I've achieved this. Look what happened in coronavirus. This sort of, competition to see who could come out with the best vaccine the quickest. I mean, Jesus, like, without status, we'd all be, we'd all be still in it. So, the status drive is so misunderstood. And as you say, I think we do ourselves a massive disservice by kind of rejecting it, by condescending to it, and going back to the Buddhism thing, this idea that we all need to kind of cleanse ourselves of wanting and striving. The Buddhists are quite correct that wanting and striving is difficult. It creates the conditions where we feel like a failure. It creates the conditions of stress and worry. But the people that have made the world a better place are not the religious people. They're not the Buddhists or the Christians or the imams or whatever. They're the people who have invented vaccines and central heating and all the technologies that have made our world safe and comfortable and just completely removed us pretty much from the reality of the animal kingdom. And all of those people will have suffered from failure and struggle and depression and all of the stuff that comes with their striving. One of the quotes, when I've written about this before, there's a guy called Alan Watts, who's a very popular Buddhist sort of thinker. And he's got this quote where he describes this idea that people want to, he says, the meaning of life is just to be. He says, this is just so obvious. But we're surrounded by people who want to achieve something beyond themselves. And he says, to an enlightened person like me, it's just absurd. And it's like, dude, for a start, this idea that we should pursue a life of just being, you are describing the life of a baby. That's the life of a baby. Just be. Just sit there and just be. Be in the moment. That's what the mindfulness people tell us. Just be. No, and your prescription against the idea that we should try and achieve something beyond ourselves is an advocation of supreme selfishness. Like, as I said, we are a highly cooperative species that has evolved to want to be of value to our fellow people, to the human family. That's an amazing thing, and that has created the conditions of civilization. So this idea that is absurd, that it is absurd to want to achieve something beyond ourselves, I think that's absurd, and it's kind of nihilistic. So that's why I think Buddhism is really overrated as a philosophy to live by.
with marketing and the world we live in and the world of personal brand, there are a lot of people that want to be influencers, they want to be big on social media. And I have to remind people, no one fucking likes you, or even worse yet, in social media, you're probably about a -2. The
Right.
second an unfamiliar face turns up on a screen, no one fucking likes you. And I said to people as well, even someone that might have fist bumped me in the street and said, "Oh, mate, you're a legend," they would not have said that if there wasn't a massive trail of me helping them, helping them understand things, helping them break down something. And I like to remind people, I was like, you don't actually like me. You like all of the instances that I've helped you. And that is kind of the premise of getting people to like you in marketing. So we've got people out there, this is my day in the life. No one cares, mate.
Yeah.
Today I went, no one cares.
Yeah.
Instead, if people only saw social media as a place to solve problems, that really is how you get someone to connect with you. And like you say, in this world where everything is a currency of trying to be good to the tribe, someone goes, "Oh, how do I start my business?" I'm like, mate, post every day solving people's problems. And within maybe a few months, they'll like you. Then after a few years, they'll actually feel like they know you, connect you. But it all comes down to solving problems. And it breaks me to see so many people think that they can just take pictures of their lunch or record their workouts and think they're genuinely benefiting the community. I'm like, bro, I don't really care what fucking workout you did today. And it's very basic formula. It's very simple. Solve people's problems and they will feel almost in gratitude to you. And that is kind of the secret elixir to building a personal brand. But people, they almost, there's an element of narcissism there, where they might not understand. And again, this all comes down to a lack of understanding surrounding status. If they don't see that energy, they don't see that rule between humans, they go, "Oh, I just need to talk about myself," and people will be attracted. And it all boils down to problem solving, because that, I assume, comes back to the very integral part of that initial community, where if you don't contribute to society and help everyone, no one's going to help you back.
That's right. It's offering value. So you've become successful because you offer value to other people. They find it valuable. And it doesn't necessarily have to be problem solving. Like artists, musicians offer value by creating music that transports people and comforts people in their darkest times. That's another way of offering value. So yeah. And we have this kind of crazy idea, as you say, that where just you can take pictures of your breakfast and if it was ever working out, that you're not offering value. That's not what you're doing there. So yeah, and again, like that's the status is the reward for doing that, and that's how we're wired. And that's, I say again, that's a wonderful thing about our species, because it's automatic. When we offer value to other people, they will automatically think, "Oh, I like that person," So and then they'll offer status back to you, because status is should be freely given by other people. You shouldn't demand it. You can't demand it. It has to be kind of freely offered, that kind of prestige form of status that we all crave.
There's one that I've been thinking about recently, which our good friend Chris is guilty of, is people go, "Oh, but what about people on Love Island? We're just watching their lives." And you go, no. What's happening here is they're giving us an invasion of privacy. And we're creating quite a chaotic environment for young people to potentially shag on TV and cheat on each other, etc. We almost want to get the darkest parts of humanity and globally broadcast it across the world. But so people go on there and they want to go on. If you said to someone, "Hey, do you want to go on Love Island and your parents can watch you shag a stranger?" The answer would be no. But the huge amount of status that they accomplish is through entertainment. And then we must look at entertainment as being something that could void someone of boredom. So there is value in that. But then the second they step out of Love Island, the second their shagging's not on television, they experience a drop of status. They experience almost like a dark reality where you've tried to cheat the system. And in some cases they have. And they have this meteoric rise. They bypass sometimes 10 years of status accrual to get to the very epicenter, millions of followers. Everyone knows your name. You're getting 10 grand a night to go to clubs in Bournemouth. But then they have to navigate a very dark area of falling off, where you're no longer giving the people what they want in that realm. And if you don't find your feet on your decline, it could be a pretty dark place. And Chris, actually, credit to him, after his time, he went on Love Island quite early, so he didn't get too much of a meteoric rise. He's got an impeccable rig, good-looking lad with a good haircut. But he's managed to capture himself on the way down and build a podcast, but it's not the same for everyone. In what other ways could potentially people cheat the system for status?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that what Love Island does is it offers entertainment. I mean, and Love Island is just classic storytelling. A story is an account of somebody overcoming obstacles in pursuit of goals. And the best reality TV, like Love Island, like Big Brother, like, they've got a group of, that they collect a group of people with weird personalities together, put them in an enclosed space and say, here's your goal, and this is what you've got to do. You've got to win this, you've got to find love, or you've got to avoid being voted out of the Big Brother house. And then what the production crews just throw loads of obstacles in their way. And that's what Story is. It's like obstacle, and people trying to overcome them in pursuit of their goals. And Love Island is brilliant at doing that. You know, do you still watch Love Island?
I'm not an avid viewer of it now.
But they have things like movie night where they show clips of, you know, they've got all these couples that are ostensibly getting on quite well, and they show clips of moments of betrayal that the other partner didn't know about. So they're constantly throwing, you know, they're throwing in bombshells. So, you know, better looking contestants suddenly come in, and you know, so
the ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, the ex-girlfriend, exactly. So it's really, you know, again, people condescend to things like Love Island, but I think it's brilliant storytelling, and the fact they managed to pull proper stories together every night, an hour or an hour and a half, even an hour and a half worth of story every single night, 6 nights a week, is really a testament to the ability of the production teams and the editing people. They're really great storytellers. And, you know, I'm a fan of Love Island. This year was just vintage. It was just like epic. It was like 3 months of just absolute, you know, and that's the thing about storytelling is gossip. You know, storytelling is imbued with gossip. And Love Island is just gossip. It's just this gossip generating machine. So they're really good. But as you say, as soon as the story ends, their status kind of plummets. And that's why there is a history of, you know, mental health problems, to say the least, with shows like Love Island, with people kind of falling, because they're a character in a movie for 3 months. They're not really, you know, Harry and Helena, and they become kind of fictional characters in a movie, and the movie ends and no one gives a shit anymore. And then they've got to kind of navigate all of that. But anyway, to answer your question in terms of what we can do to kind of game the status game, I suppose, in a way, the first thing that you can't do is get out of it. You know, like sure, do Buddhism, meditate if you know, to try and calm. To calm yourself in times of failure and stress, fine, you know, whatever. But don't try and get rid of it because you can't. And if you do, you're going to be sort of kidding yourself. So what I always recommend is to play many games. You know, each status game that you play is a source of this essential social nutrient that you need. And if you just play sort of one game, you're really vulnerable, because at some point that's going to go wrong. You know, nobody does that forever. It just never happens. And if you've got one game that you're playing, and you start doing that, that's a severe psychological crisis. That's a nervous breakdown, right there. So you know, play as many games as you can, and there should be a hierarchy of games, because especially if you're playing competence games, like if it's jiu-jitsu or, you know, being a podcaster or a writer, whatever it is, it's not easy to be competent. It's not easy to get quite good at something. Which is what you should be aiming for, at least, to be quite good at something, above average at something. And so you need to be able to focus. You need to be, especially in your 20s, teens and 20s and early 30s, you need to be really focusing on a main game, because in the second half of your life, you're going to be reaping the rewards of that. You're going to become really good at something. You know, you're going to have a body of knowledge. You're going to become an expert at something. But still, you know, you want to be playing this hierarchy of games, because when one thing starts going wrong or goes through a kind of bumpy patch, you still have these other kind of identities, these other sources of status to kind of rely on.
It's interesting. I want to move into storytelling in a second, but first, there's 2 elements of status that I want to talk about. The second one being gender and its impact on status, but the first one from that is, when I was younger, everything in my life revolved around playing rugby.
Yeah.
So if anything, my status game was rugby. I wanted to play at the best level, wanted to, you know, fill that status cup. And my profession was probably second. And that, again, was competence. And then there was sporting ability. But then going to rugby college, went to Hartbury College in Gloucestershire, realized I wasn't that good at rugby as I might have thought. And it allowed me to migrate from one status game to another. And I'm very fortunate. I sometimes say, I'm so glad I wasn't 25% better at rugby, because then I would have been stuck in the wrong game. Yeah. And there's something almost a little bit sad to the fact that so many people that I looked up to for so many years in professional sport are just one ACL away, one ligament inside the knee away from their entire game crashing down. Yeah. And that migration from that into another form of competence, another status game, it must be so difficult to navigate. And, you know, you can be at the highest highs, you can win a Rugby World Cup or a Football World Cup. Then within 5 years, like you say, those status games can't carry on forever. But in the realms of sport, even going to the Olympics, winning gold, they call it gold medal depression, right? Yes. So once you've hit the hierarchy, it's almost as if once you hit that highest point of status, there is a decline, and this unavoidable.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, and you can see. I mean, I think what one of the things that's wrong with the human brain, this illusion we always have, is that because we're so status obsessed, we suffer from a lot of envy, and so we're all guilty of looking up and going, God, you must have the perfect life. We look up at our more successful peers and go, God, if only I could be you, I would be happy. And it's just not true. Like, you're telling me that Taylor Swift is perfectly happy. She's not perfectly happy, like she's so status obsessed, and and trying to push to maintain her crown as the biggest female artist in the world. Elon Musk doesn't strike me as a particularly happy person, and so the higher you get in the status game, it's not that you become happier at all. It's just that the competition becomes fiercer, because Taylor Swift is competing with Charlie XCX and Sabrina Carpenter and Olivia Rodriguez and Rodrigo, and Elon Musk is competing with Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook and and Sam Altman. Imagine competing with these people. They must be intense and mad and insane. So yeah. Status is kind of like a drug. It's like a dangerous drug. Like, it's addictive. We can't do without it. But we get flashes of incredible happiness from it. But it doesn't. I wouldn't necessarily say that it makes us happy in that way. It's something that we can't do without. But it's just as responsible for creating moments of stress and pressure and failure than it is for creating moments of happiness. But as I've been arguing with the Buddhists, like, as painfully as it is for the high achieving individual to navigate all of this stuff, those high achieving individuals are the ones that are of the most service to other people. They're the ones that are creating the businesses that are keeping the economy going and generating the taxes. They're the ones that are creating the vaccines that are saving our lives. So yeah, the status game is tough. It's bloody and brutal, but it's also an amazing thing.
It's an amazing thing. There's also, the higher you climb, the further you can fall. But there's another thing, if we look into the realm of, let's say, tall poppy syndrome. When you climb high, other people, rather than lifting their own levels of status, try to tear you down. You see forums online, hate. We see the world on social media now where some of the comments are just abhorrent.
Yeah.
There's rumors going around online. I went to private school and I'm a trust fund kid. They're getting creative with it. I know, fair enough. And I am guilty. I have attacked people's status before in a bid to climb my own. I often talk about the fact that probably 10 years ago I would have pops at Joe Wicks. Ultimately, I was jealous of him. And I thought, I'm a good personal trainer. I'm in the budget gym doing these hours. You're earning $1 million a month. I'm going to go after you. So I can't sit here and say, oh, these horrible people, because I've done it. I've been guilty of it. And then I almost in some ways was creating a movement to try and get some of that, trying to emerge. But online, it's become quite a dark place now. I would have bantered and said that people that jump around their living room for a workout, I quote unquote, jump around your living room like a cunt. If you could zoom out and you didn't know about HIIT workouts, you're like, there's someone that's having a mental breakdown in their front room, they're sweating everywhere. Don't send someone in. But yeah, the landscape of people trying to tear down other people's levels of status, even when you hear about, a billionaire that dies or has all of his money hacked, or someone who was, the richest person in the world loses a huge amount of wealth. When Elon, they said his Tesla stock had dropped, my mum would have said, good. My mum, well, why?
Yeah.
There is almost this automated programming to hate people of a higher level of status. Where does that come from?
Well, so that's because status is relative. So the higher other people climb, the lower in status that we feel. It's a
like the orange juice.
Yeah, you like the orange juice. Yeah. So if somebody, so the higher somebody else is, the lower we feel, and that's kind of made worse by the fact that we're tribal. So if you're outside of Elon's perceived tribe, having this very highly successful person who is other than you is even more annoying and upsetting and distressing. It's weird. We've had this very weird relationship of humans with high status people. So if there's a high status person that we don't identify with, like say, if you're an enemy of Elon, then you're going to revel in their, distress and destruction, and it's going to be this wonderful thing, which is horrible. It's a nasty part of this whole dynamic. But if you identify with a high status person, it's the opposite. So you will adore them. They'll become part of your own identity. You will copy them. You will mimic them. You will, back in the tribal days, we would kind of bribe them to be in their company as much as possible, bringing them gifts and flattering them. And the reason that we would do that is because the brain has gone, well, this is a person a bit like you, but they're really high status. So I need to learn from them, learn what they're doing in order to become high status like them, and so I need to be around them. So that's the kind of subconscious thing that's going on. And in the world of the modern world of celebrity and fame, that bringing the child member gifts and complimenting them is about buying their product and defending them online, and being a Swiftie or being being a pro Elon or an anti person defending him on X. So that's what's going on. That's why we kind of hero worship people, because the brain has identified them as a model for you, and they've gone, there's something like about this person that reminds me of me, but look what they've done, so I need to be like them. And that's why you see we copy people's dress, we copy the ways. When I had this embarrassing thing, I'm sure I'm not the only one, like on YouTube, if I get into a big YouTuber, like I got into watching Spanion. Do you know Spanion?
Less Outrage, brother.
Exactly. And I started going to my dogs, less Outrage. And, it's like calling your own brother. And it's like, God, I'm a 50-year-old man and I'm saying less Outrage and brother. But it's like, it's automatic. It's embarrassing.
I'm so glad you said that. That's all we say at my jiu-jitsu gym. Is every time we're about, less Outrage.
Yeah.
It's funny when Chris came and very kindly opened some of our live shows, we could see by looking who Chris's audience were, because they dressed like him.
Wow.
It would be a well-fitted navy t-shirt, some kind of necklace on the outside, fitted jeans and Vans. And we sat back, my manager and I, and straight away I was buzzing, because these were all people that bought a ticket to my event, and they're Chris's followers. And it was great as well that, considering it was potentially my event, there were people coming up going, no idea who you are, but I saw Chris, and I'm like, I can tell, mate. I can tell by the way you're dressing that you're one of Chris's. But then again, it's because these are ambitious young men that want to accomplish a lot. And I can give Chris all the shit in the world, but I was on his podcast when no one listened to it, and he turned up week in, week out, paid attention to everything. And actually, Chris encompasses a lot of what a lot of young men in the UK should do, which kind of brings me back to this point where the differences between status and men and women. Now, some people are going to get outraged that there could be different motivational mechanisms, but it's just blatantly obvious from the outside that status would be, in most cases, easily explained as access to resources, which screams to me more of a masculine trait. What are the difference between men and women, what they're looking for, and how do we explain the synergy between those wants and needs?
So there's a couple of things you can say about gender, which I think are really important to know. And the first thing is that, and this is, in a sense, it's not controversial unless you're a feminist, like an ideological feminist. And that's that, in general, no matter where you go, men and women, generally speaking, have different interests. So it's commonly described as men like things and women like people. So men are interested in things, women are interested in other people. And again, it's a generalization.
The boys play with the toys, the girl play with the dolls.
Exactly. So it's a generalization. You have to say this very clearly. That's not saying that all men like things and no men like people. There's a big crossover in the middle, but generally speaking,
a bit like men are bigger than women.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's still some big women.
Yeah.
Men are heavier than women. There's some heavy women.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a big crossover. So you can't. Yeah. So but what that means is that if you say want to start a tractor factory, and if you have completely gender blind hiring, it's likely that you're going to get something like 80% male members of staff, because men are more interested in tractors than women. Like, they just are. And so unfortunately, what happens in the modern world is that people would look at that tractor factory and go, well, it's just really sexist here, because look at all the men and the women. It's terrible.
Misogynists.
Exactly, they're all misogynist, patriarchy, and it's just not. It's just that men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. So that's one of the big things going on. The sexist statement, and you can kind of forgive people for saying this, but it's wrong, is men are better at tractors than women. So it's not that the women in that, it's nothing to do with who's better at it. It's just to do with who's more interested. So you couldn't say that men are better at tractors than women, because there's no difference in competency in this sense. It's just that you're going to get more men because more men are interested in tractors. It's as simple as that.
If you're going to a nail salon and it's full of women painting nails, You wouldn't go in and go, you fucking sexists. You know?
Exactly.
What? So you're saying that women paint nails better than men? I actually might agree with that statement, but it's just again to do with the interests and the choice of profession. For a man, being in a tractor factory, being left alone all day to just put wheels on tractors can make him very happy. Whereas potentially we could argue that women would want maybe more conversations, more bit, how was your day? Oh, Sally, great to see you again. Oh my God, what a fantastic color. Those are kind of the differences, but we always seem to look at it through one lens, the tractor factory.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and this has real ramifications. I remember a few years ago, at the beginning of the woke era, Google were in conniptions because it was revealed that their staff in the computer engineering was about 80% male. And of course, the immediate assumption was that this was Google being sexist and having terrible hiring practices. And we had to do something. We had to figure this out. And there was a guy called James Damore who worked for Google who went, hang on a minute. And he wrote this kind of very kind of nerdy document pointing out peer-reviewed studies, which made exactly the argument I'm making to you. And he was publicly shamed and fired for even suggesting that it might not be sexism or patriarchy. It might just be that more men are interested in computer engineering than women are. And that's true. And you know, what one of, you know, as one of the things that he pointed out was that if, you know, in America, we have freedom. And if you look at the gender breakdown of university courses for computer engineering, it's 80% men. So it's little surprise then that's replicated in the companies that then they leave university, go work for these companies. It's going to be about the same. So, you know, as far as I can see, there's no evidence in that idea that Google was sexist. On the contrary, you know, when I've spoken to people in my research that work for Google, I've spoken to a couple, they said it's the opposite. Like they bend over backwards to hire women. Like it's like the idea that they're bending over backwards to hire men is just completely contrary to the truth. It's just, you know, it's not true. There's huge efforts to hire and promote women in companies like Google.
There's also some dangers to this way of thinking where from the virtue standpoint, which is probably a bid to raise status, you know, I'm more virtuous and I care more about gender equality than you, therefore I'm a better person and I'm more of a contributor to society. But then if you look into somewhere potentially more sinister, like daycares, for instance, if you said that the majority of people looking after children are women and we need more men in here, you only have the statistics of the majority of pedophiles being men, that suddenly this might not be such a positive thing to then say, oh, we need to have more women here, more men there, and then it became a race thing as well. It's crazy that in a bid to raise status in a virtual environment or an HR department somewhere, you're making differences to employment strategies and human interests that can be potentially net negatives, not even net positives. And that for me is always kind of blown my mind. But if we bring this back to the realm of status, do men and women want the same things as far as the handbags, the Rolexes, the cars, or are men trying to signal to women and women trying to signal to men in very different ways?
No, so there's a couple of things, and we're getting into really controversial territory here, but
beautiful
let's
for the
do
clips, and there's nuance as well. So it's all right.
Yeah. So the first part, the second part of your question is that no. So psychologists call this intrasexual competition. So you know, evolutionarily speaking, men compete with men, and women compete with women. Now, men are competing with men to be the most attractive to women, and women are competing with women to be the most attractive to men. That's kind of how it works. So what you'll see is you know, when you hear kind of woke beauty influencers talking about how you know, these patriarchal beauty standards that women are forced into you know, adhering to, is just bollocks. You know, so you know, thinner and thinner and thinner, bigger lips, bigger lips, bigger lips. That's women competing with women. You know, if you look at surveys, men don't like that big lip kind of, you know, Botoxy look. That's a result of women competing with women. And it's the same with men getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, they're competing with other men down at the gym, down at the CrossFit box. They're not competing with women. So it's, and again, it always strikes me as weird that women talk about male, you know, patriarchal beauty standards, you know, causing them all this suffering. But men who, you know, for your generation, when I was a young man, nobody, you know, as long as you weren't fat, it didn't matter. You could look what you want. But these days, in the superhero era, the post-Love Island era, there's huge body image pressures on men. But men don't go around blaming women for that. You know, like it's the idea.
We know it was
matriarchal beauty standards. It's not. You know, like it's a kind of crazy position to take. It's just not true.
We call this physique inflation.
Oh, really?
So if you look back in the day, even if you look at the 90s, archetypal hero, You got Nicolas Cage
Yeah.
with a whisper of hair on his head. One of the worst hairlines in history, but no one spoke about it. I was watching The Rock with Sean Connery, one of my great films. I think I grew up watching it. He's worse than going bald, but he just sweeps it back and gets on with it. Then you look at Bruce Willis, one of the, Die Hard, best Christmas film ever. If anyone argues with that, they're wrong. You look at these heroes from these films, no one cared about their hairline. No one cared about their delt definition. No one cared. Like you say, if they weren't fat, if they attributed masculine properties of, I'm willing to die, I'm going to shoot guns, whatever, we were like, perfect. Then over time, the physiques change a little bit. And then suddenly they've got to be bigger. They've got to be more jacked. And actually, I would argue in films, we've actually stripped the male alpha character a lot more. We're starting to see more female leads, or we're trying to actually feminize men a little bit. But then we look to the fitness industry, which is definitely taken over that quota. There was a picture of Ant Middleton on Men's Health, and I'm pretty sure he just climbed Mount Everest, and they were like, "Oh, he's not ripped enough."
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, they were, because he had a layer of fat on him.
Yeah,
and it's actually much healthier than most men on the front of Men's Health, because he had a layer of fat on him.
And it's getting insane, and physique inflation is only going to get worse over time. What is an acceptable standard? But it's not just men; it's women as well. And the worst part for this is probably the impacts this is going to make on dating dynamics, where, like you say, women trying to impress women, men trying to impress men. The time this will only cross over is probably expectations.
Yeah.
And I saw something awful online the other day, which I mentioned, the 6'6s. It was 6-pack.
Oh yeah.
Six
figures.
6-inch cock, a couple others.
Yeah.
And when you look at the actual percentage of mates that would be applicable to that in the opposite group, it's a fraction of a percentage.
Yeah.
So we've got these crazy expectations that are going on each side.
And there's the double standard. A man can go around talking about what cup size he was demanding, and it's just kind of crazy.
Yeah, if you're allowed to
that double standard
on Hinge, I'm pretty sure you're allowed to put in a height quota, but a man couldn't put in a dress size and say, oh, anything under a 14 is absolute no go. So you're completely right. There are those standards there. So then. Men trying to impress men. I joke about this. A Rolex I wear to impress other men.
Yeah.
And sometimes to spark conversation. You might be on a flight.
Yeah.
What do you do? And it's quite nice. And then you have your almost status dance off where you're sniffing each other's bums. Yeah. And then if you lose, you're like, do you know what? It's been great to meet you. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
Women do the same with handbags. But then would I be right in thinking that some women would like to status to other women, even if they were in a relationship, even if they're married? There's the status games of trying to signal that I'm the best mate for you. The male at the top of the status, that ladder, gets the pick of the majority of women. But then once they're coupled up and they're in a relationship, maybe the female may want to signal how well she's done.
I think that's true. But I just wanted to sort of talk about when we're just getting onto the more controversial area, which I think is a really important thing to understand about how men and women, generally speaking, differ in their status pursuit, which I think is really important to understand. And it's controversial because, like, I tried to explain this to a very close friend of mine a few weeks ago, and he kind of went ballistic, saying, "Hey, how can you say this? How can you say this?" So we've got to be super careful, because we don't want this to be true in this girl boss era. But I would invite your viewers and listeners to go out into the world and actually see if it is true. And actually, generally speaking, men and women compete for status in different ways. They value different things. So, women are very social. Women, female humans, have an evolution going back millions of years in which they had to give birth and raise children. And that phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child," is absolutely true in the hunter-gatherer era. It would be a communal thing that women would raise the children, grandparents, cousins, we'd all be doing it together. So getting along with other women was super important. And that has helped kind of define kind of female cognition into the present day. So still, women tend to compete much more in those social things. How popular am I? So all the kind of popularity, social kind of aspects. And women are much better at being social than men. We talk about the male loneliness epidemic, and that's partly because men just aren't very good at communicating in that way. I see it with my wife. We would go out walking the dogs, and Jesus, she just stops. She just stops, and there's this long conversation with a complete stranger about this, that, and the other. And I'm walking off, and I get in trouble. Did you walk off? You're so rude. Just I love to talk to this, but it's just a natural thing. And she's not talking about the men; it's always other women, and she doesn't know them, and they're not interesting conversations. So it boggles my mind. But it's a female kind of way of being. Now, men, and this is where it gets controversial, people go mad when you say this, but men tend to compete on competence. So men want to be good at stuff. So the important thing to say is that doesn't mean that women don't want to be good at stuff. It's a generalization, and it's not like a binary thing. Women don't care about being good at things. It's like a volume knob. Men are more attuned to being good at stuff. So men will compete on competence. And so because we live in a culture that loves to disparage and mock men at every opportunity, people talk about dick measuring competitions. But dick measuring competitions have built the fucking world. Men competing with men saying, how big is my dick compared to your dick?
My building's going to be bigger than yours.
Exactly. My car's going to go faster. My steam train is going to be invented before yours. That's amazing. And that's brilliant. That is that kind of monster energy that has built the fucking world. And so that's really important to understand when you want to understand men, is that these dick measuring competitions, they are dick measuring competitions. Men compete on competence. It's really important for men to feel like I'm good at something, right? And that's why male mental health is so, that's why men find it very hard to, much harder to make friends and keep friends because we're not that interested. We're not as interested in friends as women are. We're just interested in being good at stuff. And so one of the great kind of mental health programs that has sort of come about in the last 10, 20 years is called have you heard of the Men's Shed project?
You were telling me about this. Tell
So
people more.
Yeah, I think it began in Australia, and somebody had this sort of genius insight that men, there's a phrase, women socialize face to face, men socialize shoulder to shoulder. We want to do stuff together. And so they got men together, lonely men together in a shed, and said, right, we're going to be restoring furniture. And so everybody started restoring furniture together, and they built amazing bonds, and it was really successful. They had community. And I've had this in my personal life. I don't come from a particularly close family, and my younger brother and I, we went through a phase of we both got into like eToro and those stock apps. We got closer than ever because we were like swapping tips on how much have you made on Tesla, how much have you made on this. You're making sort of small amounts of money because it's a competence thing. We were getting a bit competitive. So that's a much more kind of male psychology. And again, that's why middle-aged men tend to get very, very unhappy, because middle age is when our competence starts to go away. We become fatter and slower and uglier, and we might get fired. And we hit the limits of our ability to achieve often in middle age. We stop getting the promotions and we get overtaken by younger people. So that's why middle-aged men, it's such a huge thing for middle-aged men to feel like failures, especially if they get divorced, or they can't, or they get a man who is made redundant or fired and can't provide for their wife and children. That's a psychic catastrophe for most men. So, and because it goes down to competence. And the frustrating thing about this stuff is that, as I said to my friend, it's like, and he was getting all upset. Well, you can't say that. You can't say that. And it's like, well, bless him, but he's pretty woke, and he's very, very happy to spend all of his time slagging men off and assigning negative traits to the concept of masculinity. But the moment you assign one positive trait to masculinity, i.e. competence, people go fucking mad and say you can't say it. So I just really want to push against that. It's like, we have to start being as comfortable with assigning good traits to masculinity as we are so comfortable assigning bad traits to masculinity, because that's how you end up with people going to people like Andrew Tate, because people like, if people like Andrew Tate are the only people saying being a man is good, then that's where people are going to go. So as a mainstream culture, I think these ideas, even though they're controversial, they make people uncomfortable, I think we need to talk about them much, much more.
It's so interesting you say there about building the furniture in the shed, which actually would be a contribution to society. I worry that so many people, I love playing video games, but then you say we're shoulder to shoulder, all four of us are playing Warzone, Call of Duty, let's say. It's an objective we do together. Then the one friend that it sounds crazy, being three of us dead, one alive, and we're all watching his screen and he kills the whole team and we cheer. We're like, mate, you've saved the day. Tom, you're a legend. We're giving him the status. We're being competent at that, but we're not actually benefiting society. We're almost getting a small amount of artificial, non-real world status, which is bad, because if people get sucked into the digital world of video games, they're then going to turn the console off, get into reality and realize I've accomplished nothing. So exactly what you say there, the kind of reason I wanted to go into the murky waters of the masculine, feminine debate is so we can come back to that realm of mental health. And again, like you say, some people might hate Andrew Tate, but you could also argue that if a man was trying to steal a woman's purse on a train, he could be the person that goes over and beats the fuck out of the guy. And then they might go, oh, actually, that masculinity can stay. Because we get the same standards. I saw someone on the train getting abused, or there was someone with a mental health disorder probably on a train abusing a woman, pulling her hair, and everyone just stopped and recorded it on their phone. And to me, that screamed out, we need someone, we need a, that's where we need masculinity.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there isn't a woman that could go and apprehend and beat the shit out of them. I train with a lot of them. But those are the realms of the competence, masculinity that aren't in the debate. And again, I think we're also very sheepish on teaching young boys how to fight. I would argue that if we could have more social clubs, more boxing clubs, more MMA clubs, first of all, you would see less kids getting drawn into gang violence because they're looking for that sense of community. And more so, the more someone knows how to be physically competent, the more a man knows how much he could hurt another man, the less he's inclined to do it. And there's just all these fundamentals, degradations of that kind of snapshot. Oh, we don't want boxing gyms in London. People are going to go out in pubs and start knocking each other out. Maybe for some of them, but the majority of them not. They'll be breaking up fights. They'll be stepping in. They'll be intervening. They'll be saying, hey, don't talk to that woman like that. That kind of chivalrous masculinity has been degraded as well. And it's quite sad to see from the outside that those kind of traits we don't want to promote. And like you say, there is certainly a war on young men. And the thing I kind of really want to pull out of this conversation as well is there could be young men listening to this that are having a few alarm bells going off and a few light bulbs switching on. And they're kind of sitting back and going, hold on, if I can get good at something, maybe I don't need to worry about my future career quite so much. Maybe I don't need to worry about going on loads and loads of dates. In the meantime, if someone's got pretty poor, low mood, low self-esteem, and they're not really accomplishing anything in life, the chances of you becoming a millionaire in the next few years could be pretty impossible. But again, I love to use jiu-jitsu. If that person has a job and they could go to the local jiu-jitsu gym, they could be a black belt in 10 years. Now, will being a black belt pay the bills? Maybe, maybe not. But that journey of progression, I think, is the staple point of so many people's mental health in their life. There can be chaos everywhere. Your boss could be a fucking twat. Yeah, you might be single or whatever. But I even think for me, having that status hierarchy, that building of competence, the fact that no matter if you were to cancel me, delete my social media, whatever you do, you would never take away the fact that I've got my brown belt in jiu-jitsu and that I love training. I feel like so many young men are kind of just put on this autopilot to, hey, bro, you're going to go to school, then you're going to go to uni, then just get a missus and buy a house and you'll be cool. There's no real objectives to them. I feel like if they could only understand the way they're wired, the way that they want status, they might even be there not knowing what they want from life. They could start putting strategic steps in place to accomplish it. And that, we look at this mental health epidemic and we kind of just think, oh, maybe it's something in the water. Maybe it's the economy. Maybe it's Keir Starmer and the Labour government. Maybe, or maybe it's the fact that young men, and I speak on behalf of men more so because I've been one. If I was going to talk about how young women are affected by this, people go, what do you know? You're a man.
Exactly.
But if we could just connect the millions of young men in the world to one of the kind of oldest and most prehistoric needs and urges, they could start tomorrow working towards feeling better.
Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And you know, we have things a bit wrong in terms of what we tell people, especially young people. And is you know, like this thing about money it's a misdirect. You don't need money to feel like you're having a life of meaning and purpose and satisfaction. You need to have status. And so, you know, you can have a job you hate, but if you love jiu-jitsu and you're getting good at jiu-jitsu, then that's going to be your meaning and purpose. And you know, ideally, you make your job the thing that you're good at. And again, it doesn't matter if it's not bringing in six figures or whatever you would hope to earn, because if you've got that status in your everyday life, then you are going to have generally speaking, of a life of meaning and satisfaction and purpose, because that's really what the brain wants. It isn't money. It's only money as such as a symbol of status. I mean, that's why when you look at does money make you happy? Once you've got enough money to survive and without worrying too much about your bills and this, that, and the other, once a lack of money isn't an active source of stress, it doesn't really. It sort of really tails off. It's, you know, like it's just.
And when average wages go up each year, we don't get the average population feeling better.
No, exactly. And when you go around the world, it's not as if the richer countries are happier than the poorer countries. I mean, if anyone's done any traveling, you know, Africa isn't full of miserable people. I have to tell you, you know, like you know, it's just not how it works. It just really isn't. What we want is status. What we want to feel is valued and respected. And you know, especially if you're male, the root to that is competence. Get good at something. And then once you get good at something, that's you. That's your life now.
It's annoying at school where sport wasn't really pushed on me. It was like, you can play football if you want. And, the most important things, you must learn history, or you must learn French.
Yeah.
You must learn all the things that I just have absolutely no use for at the moment. And then you go to university, and university is actually a cock off. And I find that academia is a massive cock off in itself. And you find that people play just status games all the way to the top to being the smartest in the room.
Yeah.
And then they get disgruntled at other people, like, oh, this inferior intelligent being has a nicer car than me, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's been an incredible looking status. We spoke about storytelling before earlier. And I don't believe you were aware that Andrew Schultz read your book and
I didn't know. Yeah.
did his latest stand-up, The Life Tour. I'm almost positive it's on Chris's episode. And it got me to go back and reread it. And to some people potentially listening, they go, oh, I'm not really that interested in stories. They watch Netflix, don't get me wrong. They love a good movie. They're excited to watch the new F1 film, but storytelling is not that important. And then there'll be some marketers listening that want to grow a YouTube channel. And they'll go, yeah, but I just want to get my 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Storytelling is not important to me. But storytelling is everything when it comes to humans.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we are the storytelling animal. We experience ourselves in story form. We experience our lives in story form. Our brain tries to understand what's going on in the form of a story. The brain didn't evolve to process data and do maths, equations. It evolved to tell stories. So it really is the kind of skeleton key to understanding the human condition, understanding storytelling. The human brain remixes the chaos of reality and turns it into this narrative. It puts you at the center of the world, and you're the hero, and you're overcoming your obstacles in pursuit of your goals. And that is the definition of a story.
There's Ryan Holiday with Ego is the Enemy. I felt personally attacked in that, where he says, you tell yourself a story. The danger is if you start to believe it. And I've seen kind of echoes of this in your work. Whoever read whose book first, I don't know. We're about to judge. But the danger is that if I was to look back at maybe 2017, I was waking up at 6 a.m. every morning, going live on Facebook and doing a 45-minute live. And then as 2018 creeps around and I'm starting to see the business do well, the followers increase, sometimes I could all too easily think, oh, I'm a charismatic bugger, aren't I? Well, I've got a good bit of banter. Or you could even see the comments go, oh, bro, you're the funniest. And then I stopped doing the lives as often and the business had a slump. And I was just reading the book at the right time where I go, oh, the story you tell yourself says this, but the reality is actually, it wasn't all those things that you credit. It was the hard work. It was the early mornings. It was the getting up at 5 o'clock and getting a train across Sydney to sit in a fucking shopping center before it opens to your live streams. The problem with storytelling as well, it can be a villain to our own movie arc, because if we believe it, we stop doing the very things that gave us success in the first place.
Yeah, so that's right. So the default, and I would suggest the healthiest way that we can see ourselves in the story of a life is the underdog. So there's a reason why the underdog is such a universally popular archetype in storytelling, and that's because to an ordinary healthy human being, we see ourselves as an underdog. So we see and what an underdog is, somebody who is worthy and deserving of higher status, but hasn't quite got it yet, and there are some obstacles to overcome before we get the status that we're due. Now, the kind of the hero at the end of the story in Act 3, Luke Skywalker, when he's getting his golden medal, you don't want to see yourself like that, because that's going to piss everybody off and it's going to make you lazy. What you want to see yourself is that Act 1 hero who's still the underdog, who's still got all those kind of mountains to climb and all those obstacles to overcome in order to get what they want.
So every single story that we watch, there's actually we're not just being entertained. We kind of use that as a label. What we're doing is we're looking at something and imagining ourselves in that. And without being able to feel connected to that story as if it was our own, we wouldn't enjoy it as much.
That's right. So that's why we are obsessed with stories, whether it's gossip or whether it's movies or books. And why? Why do we all flock to the cinema or flock to Netflix? It's because, as I said before, the three things that all humans want: survival, connection, and status. And so all stories are about those three things. All archetypal stories about those three things, and probably all stories, even crazy kind of postmodern ones. So if you think about a movie like The Revenant, that's a survival story. It's about a man being chased by a bear. If you think about stories like Stand By Me or Notting Hill, there's a connection story. It's about friendship, about love. You think about Barbie or Whiplash, those are about status. Those are status stories. So the reason that we love those stories is because the stories begin, we identify with the characters, and the characters are lacking in their survival is threatened, they're lacking in connection, they're lacking in status, and then we're going to learn how are they going to get their survival with their connection and status. So that we become addicted to it because it's full of information about how to get what we want. Now, if you think about the timeless stories, the best stories that have ever been told, the stories that we can watch and watch and watch and watch again. Think about Star Wars, think about The Godfather, think about Romeo and Juliet. Those stories are about survival and connection and status in pretty much equal quantities. The Godfather is about all of those things. Star Wars is about all of those things. Romeo and Juliet is about all of those things. So that's why, as I believe, those stories are so timeless, because to our subconscious brains, they're absolutely packed with information about how we get those three things that we want so obsessively: survival, connection, status.
I've seen somewhere that almost every single film that's ever been filmed is the same 5 story plots over and over again. And I never realized that Taken and Finding Nemo have the same story plot. They're just vastly different.
Yeah, sometimes they say 7, but like if you think of it, yeah, it's right. So I mean, Harry Potter and Star Wars have almost identical plots as well. So yeah, that's, we are telling the same stories over and over again, and it tends to be like a 5-act plot. So the story begins where you get an identifiable character who is lacking in survival or connection or status, or one of those three things. And in a good story, it's because they've got external obstacles ranged against them, but there's also an internal obstacle as well. That's the interesting stories, where there's something wrong with the way I'm seeing the world, or I've got some sort of personality problem that's preventing me from getting what I want. Act 2 is that they start experimenting with a new way of being. Sometimes like a guru or a teacher will come in to help them learn the ways of this new world. Then in Act 3, they'll transform and they'll become this new version of themselves. Act 4 will be all the negative ramifications of transformation will come and attack them, and they'll struggle and they'll doubt. And then in Act 5, there's a final confrontation where they'll finally choose to be this new person. And the classic example that I talk about in my book is Jaws, because Jaws is a really simple idea, simple movie but really successful. And everyone thinks Jaws is a story about a shark, but it is in a way. But what it's really about is a story about a man who's scared of the water. So Jaws is about this guy Brody, who's the police chief of this seaside town on the east coast of America, but he's terrified of the water. So that's really, if you're in charge of a beach town and you're terrified of the water, that's a bad thing. And so there are scenes there where he's kind of teased by this old man on the beach. Yeah, I've heard about you. You're scared of the water. His wife says over dinner at the beginning, where when they get the ferry from the mainland over to where they live, he's so scared of the water he won't get out of the car. He'll sit in the car. So then what happens is the shark comes along, and so he's got to deal with this, but he doesn't want to go in the water. So that whole film really is about him struggling with this fear of the water. Act 2, the shark expert comes along and starts training him about the ways of the shark, and he drags him onto a boat, but he's going to do it when he's drunk and he's kind of chaotic. Exactly halfway through that movie is when he goes, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go and fight. I'm going to get this shark on the water. So he does this brave thing. Act 4, Jaws, the shark fights back, and he has his moment of doubt, and where he tries to radio for help, but somebody smashes up the radio and won't let him. And then Act 5 is the final battle between Brody and the shark. And tellingly, and you'll see this again and again and again in movies and in stories, like the film doesn't end at the moment the shark dies, as you might imagine. The film ends when he's paddling back to water with his mate, shark expert mate, and he goes, I used to be scared of the water. I can't imagine why. And then the screen goes black and the credits roll. And that's important, because that's what the story's really been about all along. And it's only when we hear that, we feel we can let the story go, and it has a sense of closure. In the same way that The Godfather ends, not when he kills all his enemies, but when all the other mafiosis are kind of queuing up to kiss his ring and crown him as the Godfather. That's his moment of personal transformation. So that's how archetypal stories work.
I hope that you're enjoying the episode. Just over a year ago, I started using a TRT service. I was suffering with low libido, low mood, and low energy. And I've since invested into Manual, one of the UK's leading TRT and weight loss services. And if you want to find out more about what they do and how they can help, head to manual.co/Smith. There'll be a link in the description below this video. Right, let's get back to the episode. And we've seen the new era of storytelling on YouTube where, like you say with Spanian, for instance, You probably, if you saw him, would be like, oh, you're a legend. But really, it's because you love his stories.
Yeah.
And each and every place that he visits, he turns into a story. His setups are very similar. His story himself personally has a good setup to it. I'm not sure if you've seen Matt Armstrong.
No.
He rebuilds crash damaged cars.
Oh, okay.
Now, from the beginning, I didn't believe how quickly I got sucked into this. It was just someone rebuilding a car.
Yeah.
But now I realized that every single car has its own story with its own challenges.
Yeah.
And every single issue or component, whether it's that Lamborghini won't let them code a certain thing, or there's a part they can't get, or everything becomes a hiccup in the journey of him trying to almost bring back a former, this car would have been the most beautiful. There would have been someone's most proudest day, an Aston Martin from Aston Martin, a Lamborghini. And then there was a crash. So there's the bad thing that happened. And then he's the one that comes and he's there to restore it and to bring it back to life. And you feel emotive responses to what's happening the first time the engine turns over. But Matt, I've realized is a genius of storytelling, and I've been observing it for a while. First of all, use of music, dramatic music, which he does very well. His setups are great because he can raise the stakes whilst doing so. And again, I wasn't even sure what raising the stakes were, but even now he'll get a car, get an iPad and go, we're going to do it in 24 hours. Now to the viewer, they don't realize he doesn't need to do it in 24 hours. And then he will say, but we need to do it in 24 hours because this is going to happen. And if we don't fix the car in time, there are consequences. And we must get a tune on this car on Monday. It's going here. And I'm thinking to myself, mate, you're one of the biggest YouTubers in the world. You can do what you want. But I like the excitement. I like the stakes that he's building. But then there's an educational side to it. And people say that every story is an educational video and every educational video is a story. They say you almost can't have one without the other. So even someone that's potentially not that interested in how a sump in a car engine works, I'm glued to it. And he'll get maybe 2-3 million views in the first 24 hours of every video.
Wow.
And his ability to tell these stories, and then his family's involved, his dad helps him do it, his friends do it. It's incredible that we know what's happening in every story. Car's written off. By the end, it will run and drive really well.
Yeah.
But yet you cannot stop being engaged in every single one. Same with Spaniard. You know, he's going to go to a place, talk to a few locals, give you his idea on it. But it's almost not the stories that we're falling in love with. It's how the stories are making us feel.
Yeah, that's it. And I think you're right about Spaniard. He's got such a compelling story. 13 years in prison, heroin addict. You know, like he's such an interesting character, and he's very charismatic. I think the moment I got sucked in, where he said, I didn't give up heroin to be a better person. I gave up heroin to be a better criminal. That's the truth. I just thought that's such honesty, you know. Like I just thought, why am I giving the dealer money? I want the money, you know. So I just thought I love that level of a kind of honesty. And then it was when he was doing the Into the Hoods. So he would go to like you know, sort of sketchy cities in Italy and sketchy parts of Paris, and go in to these kind of hood areas. And even as this enormous bloke with a tattooed head, he would be frightened, and he'd be like, "Fucking hell," you know, and like he would be really honest about how kind of frightened he was. And so there's something really sort of compelling about that. And he's got this joy because he spent so much of his life in prison. This joy at seeing the world. Like he doesn't try and hide it or be this big man, even though he is a big man. He's giddy with pleasure at eating a sandwich sometimes. And so there's something really sort of compelling about that. So yeah, I think that's absolutely right about the storytelling. You know, it's inherent. I mean, like the weirdest example I've got of your ticking clock with this Matt Armstrong is I watched a guy, the Best Ever Food Review Show. Did you see this guy? He's got millions of followers. He's a Canadian guy that for some reason wears a red bandana, but he goes around the world eating crazy food, and he does this thing like the $100 challenge, where he's like last week he was in a sort of a remote market in Korea. Can I spend $100 on street food? And it's like, why? Where's this $100 come from? He never does it. Like it's always a bit more or a bit less. It doesn't matter. But it's that storytelling thing of, you know, my definition of a story is it's a unit of information that describes the overcoming of an obstacle in pursuit of a goal. And by adding that $100, it's a very kind of easy way of turning what would just be wandering around a market into I've got a story now. I've got a challenge.
There's Beard Meets Food.
Yeah.
Of him. So I was watching his stuff, and again, it's the story of where there's that little bit of video content before. It's like, today I'm at this place. We're in this part of America. Here's the challenge. It's not been done before. Only 12 people have tried it. You know, the setup to it is amazing. And you're thinking, is he going to be able to do it? Is he going to be able to do it? And the fact that he's human and sometimes fails some, I was glued to them. And I messaged him. We ended up doing a video together.
Oh, wow.
And we're in the middle of somewhere random near Leeds. And we go into this pub, and he goes, I've picked us a burger that we should be able to do. It will make good YouTube. And we get there, and the second the plates come out, he goes, fucking hell, And I went, what? He goes, they've stitched us up. And he goes, they made it way bigger than it should be.
Right.
Because there's not just one YouTuber here, there's two. And he was kind of a bit annoyed because he said, first of all, if they're just giving us the normal fucking burger, you would have finished it and other people would have come to try and complete it. And because they stitched us up a little bit, I kind of said to him, you're going to finish this? He's like, no. So I was like, I was trying my best. The time's on the side, whatever. So I just start to fill the air with, jokes, bit of banter, trying to like rile them up a bit, run the clock down, have some fun. My God, when it went out, the comments, he only didn't finish it because that fucking prick, the fitness guy, was chatting too much. No. It got to the point that what was going to be such a fun food challenge for me with one of my favorite YouTubers, I couldn't look at the comments.
Oh no.
I was getting abused as they were like, he would have finished that 100% if this guy wouldn't stop talking to him. So your next book.
Yeah.
When does it come out?
Oh, I haven't even started writing the next book yet. So it's going to be probably 2027,
okay.
2028. Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Well, I've never spoken about this before.
Well, you don't have to.
No, I can. Like, I can talk about it in vague terms, but it's about determinism. I want to write about determinism. So it's this idea that life is much more caused than we think it is. That I haven't really got much further than that, but that's the idea that I want to kind of pursue. That we feel completely free. And because we feel completely free, we're very good at blaming ourselves when we fail and all that stuff. But it's talking about, well, actually, we're actually kind of trapped in lots of ways that we can't actually see.
Like when we're born, where we're born,
all kinds of different ways. Genetically, we're trapped. We have a limit of our intelligence, of how physically big we can, build ourselves, our tastes and preferences. And we're talking about the male and female people versus things. Our tastes and preferences define, predefine in lots of ways, kind of areas that we can end up with in life. Time, we get older, entropy. We live in this kind of moral cage of expectations for ourselves and other people. So it's sort of examining all these different ways in which we're silently being controlled that we don't consciously see.
And that can help people have a sense of, hold on, you're kind of just going along for the ride. There are things in your control, but there's also a lot. So is it more of saying to people, enjoy it?
That's exactly right. So one thing I am sure about, I think it's a bit of a cliche for my generation, but have you heard this Bill Hicks thing? It's just a ride. Have you heard that? No, good. I'm glad you said that. So Bill Hicks was like, do you know Bill Hicks? Oh, right, he was like an iconic Gen X stand-up comic, and all the today's like all your sort of Louis C.K.'s and your Bill Burrs, they have their genetic roots in Bill Hicks. He died of cancer in his early 30s. He was like this genius comic, and he had this amazing. I watched it when I was about 16. It was on Channel 4. He had this stand-up show called Revelations, and in the end, he has this incredible speech where he just says, I can't do the speech, but it's basically saying, don't worry, it's just a ride. It has highs and lows and thrills and spills, but it's just a ride. And it is this kind of that. It's that life is this ride, and I think for younger people, that kind of self-help space is really helpful when it's kind of doing what you do, which is encouraging people, saying go for it, and all that stuff. But I think when you get older, it's nice to have a sense more of stop beating yourself up so much, stop blaming yourself so much. So it's more a book in that space for the more.
I think Bill Burr, he's had a few amazing quotes. He's got a little bit woke recently.
He has, unfortunately. We've lost him, James.
R.I.P. There's one quote where he says, you think there's nothing worse than sleeping on a futon when you're 30. Yeah. And I had to look up what a futon was, like a sofa bed. Go show my level of literature. And he goes, do you know what's worse? Sleeping in a king-size bed next to a woman that you don't love, but for some reason you had a few kids. You'd be laying in that bed dreaming of a futon.
Yeah.
He's kind of saying that there's so much tremendous risk in playing it safe in life because you might get what everyone wanted, but it might not be what you wanted.
Yeah.
And then another one similar, which he probably got from the person we were talking about before. He's on a TV show and he goes, well, you might as well just think that everything's going to be fine. And he goes, even if it's not going to be fine, wouldn't it be nice to think that it is? He goes, we could just live in this lie about, pretending that everything's going to be fine. If we fucking die, then at least we died thinking that everything was going to be fine, which comes definitely off that sentiment. One of the closing things I wanted to talk about was, in the last few years, I've experienced quite a lot of success through finding people that I look up to a lot in a realm. So I hired a YouTube guy, helped me very much with YouTube. I'm going to be working alongside you to help me write one of my next books.
Yep.
Which I'm huge. I want to be open about that as well, because you can already tell from this podcast, and I've said to you before online, I've read your books, I look up to your work a lot, and it's very difficult to have someone that could say to me, James, this is shit, and for me to go, well, if Will says it, it must be true. And I haven't started writing yet, but we've spoken about so many different things before, kind of with a little bit of a twist of some of the topics that we've covered. And again, this is kind of me selfishly asking, and other people can listen. What does the world need when it comes to books? What could I say that people potentially might need to listen to? And again, that's actually it. That's the question. It doesn't have to be a really thoughtful answer, but I'm kind of curious whilst you're here in front of me. When you look at the landscape of literature, self-help books, of which, no offense, I don't say this from a high horse, a lot of them are shit.
Yeah, yeah.
What do they need? Do they need another book?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that people are just really ignorant fundamentally about what a human being is, how we work, how we wired up. There's things about survival, connection, and status, things about self-delusion. I think the world, I think they should teach it in schools, this kind of stuff, this kind of idea of actually, right, you're a human being. Well done. You've been born. You're having a life. What does it mean? What are you? You're this weird fucking ape that's a bit like an ant. What does it mean?
Wanking in the dark behind behind people's backs.
Yeah. So I think a bit, a bit more of that. And also I think my main criticism of self-help books in general, and I've written lots as a ghostwriter, so I'm guilty of this too, is they ignore, a bit what I'm writing my next book about, which is they ignore your limitations. You would read, I'm reading one of the biggest self-help books ever, which is The Courage to Be Disliked, which is good in lots of ways. Especially, it's like probably my favorite book title ever. It's amazing book title, but it completely ignores the reality of genetics, that we are, genetically limited. That you can't just be Beyonce because you've got big dreams. You want to be Beyonce.
I think even 60 or 70% of CEOs are over 6 foot.
Exactly. That's exactly that kind of thing I'm talking about. It's like in order to have a great life, you need to figure out what game are you going to play, and not game do you wish you could play, like being Beyonce. What game can you play that you're going to enjoy and that you're going to be quite good at, and then begin with quite good and work up from there. So I think for lots of good reasons in our individualist culture, we have this whole mantra, we're surrounded by stories about dreaming big and going for it and just do it and all that stuff. It's functional in lots and lots of ways. But we have there's this kind of myth of ultimate control. There's this myth of you can be whoever you want to be as long as you dream big. And that isn't true. And I think that's something that people need to know, ought to know more thoroughly.
Hopefully that conversation, to anyone that listened, even, people that may have read your book before, I'm sure there's going to be massive insights to that. I just want to thank you very much for coming on and answering the questions so well.
No, thank you, James. Thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.